It began with a smell, not a smell you forget, the kind that curls into your nose and coats your throat, makes your skin crawl even when you don't know why yet. Sour, like rotting food left in a sealed container for weeks, but heavier. It clung to the back of the mailman's throat as he dropped the envelopes into the slot of 214 Jefferson Street, just like he had every Friday for years. Only this time, he gagged halfway down the porch steps. Across the street, Mrs. Fontaine watched through her dusty blinds. She hadn't seen Helen Doyle in months, not since fall, when the former cop yelled at two teens for lighting fireworks in the alley. She always had that voice, Fontaine whispered to herself, sharp like broken glass. Inside, the house was dead quiet. Not the kind of quiet where life rested. The kind of quiet where something once screamed. The walls, once white, were stained gray and yellow, blotched with mold. Newspapers clung to the floor like they'd melted there. Bottles, broken plates, cat litter, bones. Bones? Lay under sagging furniture. Rats moved freely, more confident now. They had claimed the place. But the bedroom door remained closed. No one had been inside since Helen retired 12 years ago. She lived alone, kept to herself. Didn't need anyone, she'd once said in a voice that made even the department chaplain nod and back away. The official call to investigate came not from concern, but from a utility complaint. Multiple neighbors had filed reports about a sewer stench. When city workers arrived with masks and gloves, they didn't expect to find what they did. Behind the front door, the entryway had collapsed. Piles of hoarded garbage filled the corridor. They climbed over old furniture and moldy cardboard, ducked under rusted pans dangling from ceiling wires. And then one of them screamed. Buried under a mound of black trash bags, a cracked photo frame stuck out. It was the only clean thing in the house. Someone had polished it, a young woman in uniform. Helen Doyle, in her prime. Bright eyes, sharp jawline, Medal of Valor pinned to her chest. But behind the photo, flesh. Human flesh. Bloated, partially decomposed, arms curled around a rat-bitten blanket, feet bare, a silver bracelet still clung to one ankle, her badge number engraved on it. The team stood frozen. Rats scurried over their boots. One worker threw up into a broken cereal box. Outside, police tape went up. People whispered. Local news crews rolled in, but no one cried. No one seemed surprised. She'd been missing for over 7 months, and not one person had filed a report. 3 days later, Claire Whitmore sat in her car outside the house. The engine was off, the windows halfway down. Wind carried the stench into her mouth. Her stomach tightened, but she didn't flinch. She had known it would smell like that. Claire hadn't seen Helen Doyle in 32 years, but she remembered her perfectly. She was 9, her wrists bruised, her lips split. Her dad smelled like bourbon and sweat and hatred. And one night, after a scream too loud to ignore, someone kicked the door down. Helen was the first adult who had ever looked Claire in the eye like she mattered. She didn't say much, just wrapped her coat around the girl and led her outside. But Claire never forgot. So when she saw the news banner on her phone, retired female officer found dead, buried in own home, she knew. Before they released the name, she just knew. Now, Claire stared at the porch, the front door sealed with a police sticker. A rat limped across the driveway, dragging a broken tail. Claire reached into her glove compartment. A voice recorder, a notebook, a pen. Her old credentials, cracked and outdated, from when she worked the crime beat at the Poughkeepsie Journal. She hadn't published anything in 4 years. Burnout, mostly, disillusionment. But now, something called her back. Not a story, not a headline, something deeper, something owed. The neighbors were tight-lipped. Claire walked the block in the late afternoon, shadows stretching long behind her. Everyone claimed they hadn't seen much, just figured she'd moved. That house always smelled weird. No one cared. Or they were pretending. Only one person opened the door without hesitation. Benji Parker. He was older now, hairline receding, arms tattooed, voice deeper. But Claire recognized him, the skater kid Helen used to chase off her porch, only to leave sandwiches out a week later. He had seen her kindness behind the sharp edges. Benji let Claire in, sat her down, gave her tea in a chipped mug. "I didn't think anyone would come," he said, eyes red. "No family, no funeral, no one's even said her name out loud since it happened." Claire didn't touch the tea. "I want to write about her. Not what the news said, not the corpse. I want to write about who she was. Can you help me?" Benji didn't answer at first. He just stared at the steam curling from his mug. "She used to talk to herself," he finally said. Loud. Like someone was arguing with her. But when you'd ask what it was, she'd say, "You'll know one day." And then she'd smile. Not a nice smile. A warning. He stood, rummaged through a drawer, and handed Claire a cassette tape. "I found this under her back steps. I was feeding the cats. It was wrapped in plastic. Says, 'Play me,' that's all." Claire turned the tape over. On one side, in black marker. "If I end up dead, this wasn't an accident." Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat on the motel bed, fingers wrapped around the cassette tape like it might vanish if she let go. The cheap lamp cast a halo over the table. Outside, cars passed with muffled hums. Inside, the silence pulsed. She had no cassette player. She knew who did. She drove just after dawn. The street hadn't changed. Elm trees still hunched over cracked sidewalks. The same faded mural stretched across the wall of the corner deli, a child holding a kite in front of a river. Claire remembered when they painted it. She'd been 13, watching from a bus window. Leaving the group home, she hadn't lived in Poughkeepsie in over 20 years, but now the town pressed against her again, like it had been holding its breath, waiting for her return. Jonas Rivera lived above the pawn shop now. He had always been the quiet type in high school, headphones on, hoodie up, never making eye contact. But he'd once fixed her Walkman when she was, and he never asked for anything in return. She climbed the stairs and knocked. The door opened on the second knock. He blinked once. "Claire?" She held up the tape. He didn't ask questions, just stepped aside. His apartment smelled like solder and cinnamon. On the shelves, vintage cassette decks, VHS players, and old radios lined the walls like soldiers from another time. "You still fix things?" she asked. "I never stopped," he said. He slid the tape into an old Sony player, adjusted the dials, pressed play. A second of static, then her voice. "If you're hearing this, I'm dead, or I wish I was." Claire froze. It was Helen. Older, slower, but unmistakable. "Some of them are still here," the voice said. "They think no one's looking anymore, that I gave up, that I lost my mind. But I remember everything. 1991, January 12th. The girl's name was Claire Whitmore. She saved me, though she never knew it." Claire blinked hard. "I've kept everything. It's in the basement, behind the heater. If I disappear, if they say I fell or went crazy or died of rats, it's a lie." The tape ended with a sudden stop. No rewind, no click, just silence. Claire sat still, jaw tight. "Jesus," Jonas whispered. "I have to go back there," she said. "They won't let you in." "They will now." She drove in silence. Her breath fogged the windshield. She had filed a request for limited press access earlier that morning. No one answered, but she had a plan. She'd use the tape. She'd leak it if they didn't give her entry. But as she turned onto Jefferson Street, something stopped her cold. The house was boarded up, wood over every window, the door covered in steel. A new sign out front, "Condemned, structurally unsafe." No entry. The tape had never existed, not to them. Claire stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, pulse loud in her ears. She felt the old helplessness return, the kind she buried for decades. When she was little, people had said the same things about Helen Doyle. "She's crazy. She yells too much. She should just retire already." But they never said that when Helen dragged an abuser out of a home, or when she stood between a kid and a fist, or when she filed reports no one else would touch. Now they wanted her to rot, not just her body, but her memory. Back in the motel, Claire opened her laptop. She pulled up her old files, stories she never published, notes from interviews, obits, archived police reports. Her fingers moved fast, as if they had waited years to speak. She began writing, "The Forgotten Cop of Jefferson Street, What Really Happened to Helen Doyle." She listed everything she knew, every detail, every date. She included Helen's voice, transcribed word for word, then she paused. There was something else, something deeper. She had never told anyone the whole story. Claire was 6 the first time she heard the word garbage used to describe her. Not by a kid, by a teacher. "She's from that house," the woman whispered. "The garbage one, with the drunk." Claire hadn't cried, just stared at her shoes. One of them had a hole in the toe. Helen Doyle came 3 years later, not to arrest anyone, not at first. She brought groceries, watched Claire read, asked if she liked dogs. Then one night, Helen showed up with bruises on her arm and rage in her voice. She kicked down the door, pulled Claire out from under the bed, hugged her like something fragile and sacred. The next morning, Claire was in a group home, and Helen was suspended for excessive force. No one ever said thank you, not even Claire. She stared at the blinking cursor, then typed, "I owe her this." She knocked on doors again the next day. One by one, the same excuses came. Didn't see anything. She was always weird. She chose to live like that. But finally, someone cracked. A boy, 17, skinny, hood pulled up. "I saw her like back in February," he muttered. "She was yelling into a walkie-talkie. I thought she was nuts, but she kept saying someone was in her house. Like already inside. She said they were watching her. Did you tell anyone?" "No one listens to me." Claire wrote it all down. Then he added, "She said your name." Claire looked up. "What?" "She said, tell Claire I kept everything." And then she just ran back inside. That night, Claire sat in the car again. The house loomed ahead, boarded and silent. But something shifted in her chest. This wasn't just a story anymore. It never was. She took out her phone and opened the city records database. Searched the permit number on the condemned sign. It wasn't real. The sign was fake. Claire stood in front of the condemned sign again. Only this time she wasn't looking at the door. She was looking at the screws. They didn't match. The screws on the sign were rusted, long and corroded. But the bolts on the actual door seal were stainless steel, brand new. Someone had put the sign there as a cover. Whoever boarded the place up wasn't from the city. She photographed everything. Then she checked the perimeter. A side window cracked open, half covered with an old AC unit. It took her 10 minutes and a rusted screwdriver, but she made it in. The smell hit her again, harder this time. Without a mask, it felt personal, like the house was mourning. She stepped into the hallway. Just the orange glow from her phone screen and the noise of her own breathing. Underfoot, garbage shifted. Rats skittered. She kept moving. The basement door was half-rotted, swollen with moisture. Behind it, a steep wooden staircase, warped with mold and time. Claire gripped the rail and descended slowly. The beam from her flashlight landed on a furnace, rusted, ancient, surrounded by cans, boxes, and loose wiring. She remembered Helen's voice. Behind the heater. Claire pulled the light lower and scanned the walls. Something caught her eye, a crack in the paneling. She pushed. It gave way with a moan, revealing a crawl space behind it, small, no more than 4 feet deep. Inside, 2 metal boxes and a faded blue backpack. She reached for the first box. It was cold, heavy. Inside, files. Dozens of them. Some yellowed, others crisp. Every folder marked with names and badge numbers. The second box held cassette tapes, at least 30. All labeled in Helen's blocky, slanted handwriting. The backpack held something stranger, a child's drawing, Claire's from when she was 9. a tiny plush rabbit with a missing ear, and a photograph of a young woman identical to Claire, but not her, written on the back. If they find her, it all falls apart. Claire barely slept that night. She laid everything out on the motel bed: notes, photos, maps. She started cataloging tapes and files. It was like Helen had spent her retirement building a case no one ever wanted to see. And the more she looked, the clearer it became. Helen believed someone inside the department was part of a decades-long cover-up. Abuse reports ignored, victims silenced. Officers rotated to different towns. Helen's notes were paranoid, but thorough. Cross-referenced, dated, notebooks full of shorthand and timestamps. One name kept repeating, Raymond Knox, current chief of police. And next to his name, in red pen, he knows about Claire. The next morning, Claire met Jonas again. I need help digitizing these, she said, holding up the tapes. He stared at the boxes wide-eyed. This is insane. No, she whispered. This is truth. They started listening. The tapes were part diary, part confession. Helen spoke to herself, or maybe to Claire. She detailed everything: cases that were buried, children who vanished, officers who drank with predators. A specific night in 1991 when she followed a call she wasn't assigned to, and then one tape cut off mid-sentence. A sudden crash, a scream, and silence. Jonas paused it, rewound, played it again. Same thing. Claire's skin went cold. That afternoon she visited City Hall under the pretense of accessing public records. The clerk was distracted. Claire had 15 minutes alone with the filing cabinet. She found what she needed: Helen's disciplinary file, the report from her suspension, and a sealed document titled Operation Shield, Internal Use Only. She slipped the last one into her coat. Later, in the car, she opened it. Most of the pages were redacted, but one line stood out. Doyle continues to interfere with SHIELD operations. Monitoring recommended. SHIELD wasn't just a nickname. It was real. An internal operation. Authorized. Funded. And Helen had been under surveillance. Claire's motel was ransacked that night. She returned from Jonas's place to find the door cracked open, her laptop gone, tapes scattered, one file box missing, but the backpack, the one with the drawing and the rabbit, was untouched. Whoever broke in knew what to take. But they chose to leave the personal things. It was a message. Claire called Benji. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Yeah?" "You said she talked to herself. Argued even." "Yeah, like someone was listening, but angry." Claire hesitated. "Did she ever mention someone named, like me? Someone who looked like me?" Benji was silent for a long time. Then, "She used to say there was a second file, one they deleted, about a girl who disappeared. Same age, same year, same everything." "And?" "She said the girl had a twin, but the twin survived." Claire felt the breath leave her chest. "Wait, are you saying—" "I think she thought it was you." Claire spent the next 2 hours in the county archives, piecing together child welfare cases from 1987 to 1993. Most were sealed, but one name appeared 3 times. Redacted, but all was tied to the same badge number, Duck-Tooth Thrief Kadint, Officer Helen Doyle, and all was tied to one address, Claire's childhood home. She searched the system for birth records. Nothing for Claire Whitmore before 1991, but a single line showed up under a different name, Eliza Vaughn, born 1985, status missing. Last seen with older sister unnamed. Claire's vision blurred. Jonas found her in the car parked crooked outside the archives building. She held out the drawing. She knew, Helen knew. Knew what? That I'm not who I think I am. The morning after the archives, Claire couldn't move. She lay in bed at the motel, the rabbit plush in one end, the drawing in the other. The motel's ceiling fan spun slowly, blade squeaking like a clock. If her name wasn't Claire Whitmore, Then who was she? She stared at the old drawing. It was unmistakably hers. Her clumsy left-handed scrawl, the red crayon sun, the tiny girl with one shoe. But her name, written at the top in Helen's handwriting, wasn't Claire. It was Eliza, the lost girl, the missing file, and the sister that had disappeared. Jonas drove her to the old Department of Child Services building. It was closed down in 2007, now fenced and abandoned. But Jonas had a contact who once worked there. They met in a diner off Route 9. Mrs. Hartley had been a social worker from 1981 to 1999. Small frame, kind eyes, hands that trembled even holding a mug of tea. When Claire mentioned Helen Doyle, the woman paled. She was fierce, loud, but she cared. Too much, maybe. Do you remember a case she fought for? A girl named Eliza? Mrs. Hartley nodded, slowly. She insisted 2 girls lived in that house, but every official report said only one. The mother denied it. The father refused to speak. And the files? They were altered, pages missing, even photos. Claire leaned in. And what happened to Eliza? Mrs. Hartley's lips quivered. She vanished. And a week later, Helen was suspended. Back in the motel, Claire reviewed more tapes. Helen's voice cracked with exhaustion. They erased her. But I remember, Eliza Vaughn. She was 6. The older one, always quiet. Claire screamed, but Eliza, she watched. Always watching. And then she was gone. Just gone. Claire pressed pause. Her heart raced. Everything she believed about her own life, her name, her story, was a lie. Later that day, Claire met with Sergeant Marlene Knox, the current police chief, and Helen's former subordinate. They sat in the back booth of a bowling alley diner, neutral ground. Knox wore sunglasses indoors and never removed her gloves. Her tone was clipped, defensive. She was unwell, Knox said. Helen, paranoid, aggressive. She was right. You don't know what you're digging in. Actually, Claire. She pulled out a copy of the Operation Shield document. Knox didn't flinch, but her jaw tensed. You're lucky that's redacted. And I followed orders. Claire left with more questions, but that night someone slid a note under her motel name. No return address. Just a single line, written in blue ink. She kept everything. You're not done. Taped to the back, a storage unit key. The next morning, Claire and Jonas arrived at Hawkstone Storage, a remote facility outside city limits. The key matched a rusted locker. Inside, a locked trunk. 3 banker boxes, a sealed envelope addressed, "To Eliza, if she ever finds this." Claire didn't open the envelope, not yet. She opened the trunk. Inside, a faded yearbook Polaroids of children, bruises visible on arms and legs, a gun, a stained notebook. In that notebook, one name was circled again and again. Deputy Chief Raymond Knox. And underneath, in shaky writing, the girl in the yearbook was never Claire. She was Eliza. The system switched them. Claire opened the envelope at last. Helen's handwriting filled 3 pages. I did everything I could. They threatened me. They called me unstable. But I remembered your eyes. You were always the quiet one, the one who saw too much. I couldn't save both of you, but I saved the one I could hide. Claire couldn't breathe. I filed a false report to protect you, gave you a new name, said the other girl was missing, but you, Eliza, you survived, and now they know you're back. Jonas spoke quietly in the car. You know what this means, right? They're not just covering up Helen's death, they're covering up mine. Claire looked at the photo again, 2 girls. Arms around each other, one named Claire, one named Eliza, only one survived. But which one was she? That night, the motel caught fire. Claire and Jonas barely escaped. The storage unit was ransacked hours later. Everything gone. Someone was watching every move. Claire stood by the Hudson River the next morning. Her childhood came back in fragments. A red door, the sound of a belt, hiding in a closet with her sister, whispering, "Don't cry, he'll hear us." Helen's voice saying, "It's okay now, I've got you." But which sister had she been? She called her old therapist from 10 years ago. "Do you remember our sessions?" Claire asked. There was a pause. "I remember—" "You said your name was Claire," the woman said, "but you never remembered your birthday. You said it changed every year." Claire hung up. That night, she couldn't sleep. At 3:11 a.m., her phone lit up with a text from a blocked number. "You were never supposed to come back." And then a second one, "But now that you're here, we need to finish what was started." Attached was a photo, taken hours ago, of Claire and Jonas standing in front of the storage unit. They checked into a new motel under Jonas's name. No phones, no credit cards. They didn't speak for an hour. Claire sat in the dark, staring at the photo that had been... The composition was perfect. Too perfect. Slightly elevated angle. From a parked car. Shot between the bars of the fence at Hawkstone Storage. Someone had been watching them for days, maybe longer. The next morning, Jonas called with a whisper in his... Claire met him at the pawn shop. He had stayed up all night cleaning a damaged that had been almost unreadable. It was one of the ones recovered before... He pressed play. Helen's voice filled the room. "They came to me in '93, 2 men. I recognized one. The other wore no badge. They said if I didn't let the file go, they'd bring up what happened with the girl. Said I fabricated her identity. I told them I had proof. They laughed. Said, 'You buried that proof yourself.'" Claire gripped the table. Jonas skipped ahead. "One more thing. If someone finds this, I think it was the mother. I think she was in on it. I saw her once, years later. She looked right at me and smiled." Jonas paused. Claire whispered, "I thought she died." Claire dug deeper into hospital records, social services documents, court files. Most of it was gone, deleted or redacted. But one address kept appearing. 246 Willow Drive. The house she grew up in, the house she thought had burned down. It hadn't. It had just been sold under a different name. They drove there at dusk. Claire parked across the street. The house was different. New siding, fresh windows, a garden in front. But the porch was the same. And so was the tree with the crooked trunk beside it. A woman stepped out to water the plants. She was older now. Hair dyed black, eyes sharp. Claire's lungs stopped moving. Her mother, not dead, very much alive. They followed her the next morning. She drove to a nursing facility, Eagle Hollow Memory Care, just outside town. Inside, she signed in as Diane Vaughn. Claire felt the ground shift beneath her. That name. Her mother's name. She waited an hour before going in. The receptionist said, "Diane came every Tuesday to visit a patient in room 212. That patient's name, Claire Vaughn." Claire stood outside the room, heart beating like a warning. Jonas touched her arm. "Are you sure?" She nodded and opened the door. Inside, in a padded chair by the window, sat a woman no older than Claire herself, pale, thin, vacant eyes. Claire froze. The woman looked exactly like her, or rather, how she would have looked if she had never left that house. The tag on her wrist read, "Claire Vaughn, do not transfer without family consent." A nurse walked in, smiled. "You must be Eliza." Claire's throat closed. What did you say?" "She asks for you sometimes." "Well, not you exactly. She just says, 'My sister.'" Claire dropped into a chair. Her twin was alive. Alive, but locked away. Outside, Jonas was speechless. Claire stared at the sky. She didn't die. Helen didn't lie. They just hid her, just like they hid me. She knew, Jonas whispered. Helen knew the truth. And so did Knox. So did my mother. That night, Claire broke into the nursing facility. She couldn't stop herself. She sat beside the other Claire, her twin, and whispered stories from their childhood. She didn't know if they were real. She just made them up. about red kites and rainy days and hiding under blankets. Then her sister spoke, barely a whisper. Helen said you'd come. The next morning, Claire drove to the cemetery. Helen's grave was barely marked. She placed the rabbit plush at the base of it. "I know now," she said. "You weren't protecting a file, you were protecting us." But when she returned to the motel, Jonas was gone. Door kicked in, laptop smashed. On the table, a note written in red ink. "If you want the truth, come alone." An address followed, the basement of 214 Jefferson Street, midnight, the house where Helen died, where it all began. Claire stared at the note, then at herself in the mirror. She didn't know who she was anymore, but she knew what she had to do. Claire arrived at 214 Jefferson Street at 11:58 p.m. The boards were gone. The front door hung open, as if the house had been waiting. Inside, the air was heavy, no longer putrid but stale, like grief that never left. She stepped over broken furniture, across collapsed newspapers, past the framed photo of Helen in uniform, now cracked and crooked. She didn't call out. She descended the basement steps, flashlight in hand. The crawl space behind the furnace was open, and inside, Jonas, tied to a chair, bloody, conscious. He shook his head violently, eyes wide. A figure emerged from the shadows, Chief Raymond Knox. "I warned you," he said calmly, "but you had to come back." Claire didn't flinch. "You lied about everything," he nodded, "because I had to." He paced slowly. "You think you're the victim. You're not. Helen broke the rules. She falsified state records, stole a child, hid her. That's you, Claire. Or Eliza, whatever you call yourself." Claire's voice was cold. "You're the one who helped cover up the abuse." "You think you understand what happened in that house?" Knox snapped. "You don't. You remember broken glass and screaming. Helen remembered paperwork and politics. But I remember a child that didn't speak, who stared at walls, who stopped eating." He pointed at her. "That child was you." Claire froze. "What are you saying?" Knox stepped closer. "There were never two girls." Silence. Claire's heart dropped. "What?" "Only one. But Helen needed a reason to justify what she'd done, so she invented the twin. It made her theft sound like a rescue, and then she started to believe it." Claire staggered back. "No, I saw the other girl. In the hospital. She looked just like me." Knox shook his head. "That girl? A Jane Doe. Has been for years. Trauma patient. No history. No name. Helen used her to reinforce the lie. She knew you'd come one day." Claire's mind spun. "But the photos can be staged. You know that." Jonas groaned behind them. Claire turned to him. He whispered, barely audible, "Don't believe him." Claire pulled the notebook from her bag, the one Helen had left. Inside, sketches, timelines, notations. One page stood out. It showed two circles, intersecting. Claire, Eliza arrows drawn between them. In the margin, they tried to split her, but she was always both. Claire's knees buckled. A memory slammed back. A closet. Her own voice saying, "Don't cry," but no other voice answering. No twin, just echoes. Her mind had created the sister to survive. Helen had protected that delusion, built an identity around it, given her a name, a history, a second life. "I'm not real," Claire whispered. Knox moved toward her quietly. "No, you're whoever you choose to be, but if you walk out of here, none of this ever happened." He held out a folder. Inside. "You get to vanish again. This time, for good." Claire stared at it, then at Jonas, bloodied, bruised. "I won't leave him." Knox sighed. "Then neither of you leave." Claire acted fast. She smashed the flashlight into the power box beside the furnace. Sparks flew. Darkness exploded. In the confusion, she lunged for Jonas, pulling him from the chair. Knox roared, but in the blackness, he couldn't see. Claire and Jonas scrambled up the stairs, crashing through the front door into the street. Police arrived 11 minutes later. Knox was gone. No trace, no prints. Jonas was taken to the hospital. Claire gave her statement, all of it, the tapes, the drawings, the files, but without Knox, without concrete proof. They called it inconclusive. Another small-town mystery swept away. 3 days later, Claire returned to the nursing home. She sat beside the woman in room 212. She wasn't her twin. She wasn't even Claire Vaughn. She was just a survivor, like Claire. Claire took her hand. "I don't know who you are," softly, "but I believe you saved me, just by being here." She buried the rabbit plush next to Helen's grave. "I know now," she whispered. "You weren't lying. You weren't broken. You were just trying to give me something to hold on to." Tears filled her eyes. And maybe that's all we ever needed. That night, Claire checked into a small cabin in the Catskills. She opened a blank notebook. On the first page she wrote, "I was born twice, once into pain, once into silence, but now I get to choose who I become." Then she turned off the light, and for the first time in years, weeks passed. The town moved on, the way small towns always do. The yellow tape around 214 Jefferson Street was taken down. The boards went back up. Eventually, someone else would own the house, paint it, replace the windows, mow them. But the smell, the kind that settles into wood and memory, might never leave. Claire didn't go back. She stayed in the Catskills for weeks, then months. Jonas came sometimes, brought coffee, fixed a leaky pipe, left without needing answers. She wrote every day, not for a publisher, not for the world, just for herself. She filled 7 notebooks before winter. The 8th one began with a single sentence. "The girl in the closet was never rescued. She crawled out alone." One night, snow fell heavy and quiet. She lit a fire and played a cassette, one of the last she had left. Helen's voice crackled through the static. "If you're hearing this, it means you survived. And if you survived, that means you still have a choice." Claire closed her eyes. "You can believe what they told you, that you were weak, that you were broken, that you needed saving. Or you can believe what I saw, a girl who stared down hell and came out the other side." A long pause. "Claire, it doesn't matter what name you choose. Just don't let them take it from you again." She didn't cry. Not that night. Instead, she stood outside, snow falling in her hair, breath visible in the moonlight, and whispered, "I'm here, and I remember." The following spring, she self-published her book, The Forgotten Cop. No press tour, no interviews, just one dedication on the first page. For Helen Doyle, for the voices that were silenced, and for the ones who screamed until someone finally listened. It reached 12 people the first month. Then one of them shared it online. Then 10,000 read it, then 100,000. Years later, a journalist from The New Yorker came knocking, wanted to know if the story was real. Claire smiled, said nothing. Just handed her the last remaining object from that time, a silver bracelet with a badge number engraved on it. The journalist read the number, paused. Whose badge was this? Claire looked out the window. The mountains were blooming again, and she said softly, "Mine."